Her had been split open, punctured by fragments of metal, and her genitals had likewise been perforated by shrapnel and debris.
What? Okay, there are videos out there that all talk about the same 3 stories where an office chair exploded, leading to serious injury and death. The best documented of these 3 stories happened in 2013. A 24-year-old girl had finished taking a shower. She came out, she sat on her computer chair and started blow drying her hair when the chair that she was sitting in exploded with such force and noise that later neighbors said that they had thought that there was a gas explosion. Like, that is absolutely nuts. Now, thankfully, her brother was in the house and he managed to run over to her. She was barely conscious. She whispered that she was in pain before losing consciousness, and her brother, thankfully, was able to get her emergency help. She was taken to the hospital where surgeons removed a dozen metal washers, large scraps, large pieces of plastic, small pieces of plastic, both from her buttocks area and inside her abdominal cavity. That's not even the craziest part. Her rectum was torn and she had a hole pierced through her, Jesus Christ. Thankfully, she survived, but not much else is known. These next 2 cases aren't as well documented. In 2009, a 14-year-old boy was sitting on his computer chair at his computer when again the chair exploded with such force, but unfortunately this time metal scraps entered into his rectum, causing severe bleeding, and unfortunately the boy did pass away from his injuries. And then the final story is from 2008, where a 65-year-old man was sitting in his chair when it exploded, but thankfully this man walked away with just injuries to his arm and to his back. But he narrowly escaped death because the chair again exploded with such force that a 6-inch metal rod from inside of the chair slammed up and stuck into the ceiling. I can't even imagine if his body had been in the way for that one. My God. 2 questions I want to answer are: 1, how did these chairs explode? And 2, are you in danger? Will your chair explode on you? And for question number 2, I'm going to be bringing in an expert. So how exactly did these chairs explode? Well, there's this Chinese show that reminds me a lot of Mythbusters that I found on YouTube. And they actually managed to make 2 chairs explode. One even catches on fire. It's absolutely nuts. Now, I'm not Chinese, I don't understand Chinese. Thankfully, there's a helpful comment that explains that the chair that catches on fire, that chair was actually from an unknown manufacturer, and then the one that explodes like 10 feet into the air, that is an ultra budget chair purchased for around $5. And they go on to explain that, hey, the reason why these chairs exploded is because they used compromised parts. And one of the parts they used that was compromised is the canister, the gas canister in your chair that lifts your chair up and down. Instead of filling that with nitrogen, they instead filled it with regular air. This next part, I had to connect a few dots, so please take that with a grain of salt. If you understand physics and chemistry better and I'm wrong about this, let me know that down in the comments below. But anyways, the reason why manufacturers typically use nitrogen in the gas canisters is because nitrogen has a consistent pressure. So when temperature changes, when it gets hot, when it gets cold, the pressure of nitrogen does not change. However, if you fill it with regular air is susceptible to pressure changes based on temperature. So air, as many of you know who live in hot and cold states, when it gets hot, air begins to expand. And what happens when you spin in your chair, when you raise your chair up and down? That's friction. Friction creates heat, so the air starts to expand. If your chair is exposed to direct sunlight or in a hot room, again, the air starts to expand, and then when somebody sits and puts more pressure on it, all of a sudden, boom. Now, you, the viewer watching right now, might be sweating a little bit because maybe you are sitting in a super cheap chair from an unknown manufacturer. As a matter of fact, if you're standing right now, I really don't blame you. But you really probably don't need to worry about this, but don't take my word for it. Here joining me is David Crandall from CrandallOffice.com. These guys have been refurbishing chairs for over 20 years. David, in all your years of refurbishing chairs, have you guys ever heard of a chair exploding?
Chair exploding. So I have heard of it. I've never experienced it or seen it in person or had any customers experience something like that. And I've done a little bit of research into it and talked to our gas cylinder supplier. who has confirmed that there has been some reports of this primarily overseas and quite some time ago. My understanding is that there was some lower end manufacturers using materials that they shouldn't have been using and gases, filling the cylinders with gases that they shouldn't be using, that kind of created some of those issues.
A lot of people watching this video probably own super cheap chairs from Amazon or from somebody who resold their chair. Should they be worried?
No, I don't think that people should be worried even if you're buying a lower price chair, regardless from the manufacturer, if you're getting it. Anything that has come into the US from overseas is going to need to go through a ton of regulatory standards, even just to get onto a shipping container to come over here. Anything that's, all gas cylinders should properly be manufactured with nitrogen as the gas inside of the cylinder. It's an inert gas that has there's no kind of risk of explosion or anything along those lines. Anything that's going to be, compressed oxygen, propane, anything flammable that is going to be inside those cylinders is not going to make its way into the U.S. That said, if you're buying a lower priced chair, if you're getting into that, $50 to $100 product price range, you're probably getting lower quality components across the board, including the cylinder, that might fail a little bit prematurely, or you're just going to have a lower quality product that's not going to last quite as long. So you will run into some of that. That said, when a cylinder fails, it's typically, there's rubber O-rings that are essentially holding that gas in place. Typically that's what fails when a gas cylinder fails, and it's going to be a slow leak of gas if that does fail. Even if you threw something like that into a fire, it's not going to explode. That seal is going to fail and the gas is going to escape. It's not going to be a big deal, especially because it's a non-flammable gas.
Final question for you. What can people do to prevent their gas cylinders from failing on them?
What we've always found is that if a cylinder makes it through the first year of its life, you're probably going to get a very good lifespan out of it. If it fails within typical failures or within that first year, and so take care of it, make sure that it's not being abused, and you should get good life out of your cylinder. Beyond that, making sure that you're not overloading too much weight onto the cylinder with more use is going to be a cylinder's only going to take so much use, so the more weight you put onto it, don't have 3 people sitting on the chair, don't have your kid jumping on it, don't jump on it yourself. Stay within the scope and use of the cylinder, which is to support a person while they're sitting, while they're working, not roughhousing or doing anything weird, dragging it behind a car. I've never done that.
Thank you so much, David. If you guys can give this video a thumbs up for David's sake, and if you're looking to buy a used chair, I highly recommend CrandallOffice.com. Again, those guys have been in business for over 20 years. They have an excellent reputation, especially over on Reddit, where they're super active, and that is no easy feat. All their refurbished chairs come with an excellent 12-year warranty, and they are just fantastic people. Until next time, everybody, stay honest.